To quote Christian Horner, drivers will just try and get their nose ahead at the apex and then claim they have to be given rule. Where was this last week, Christian? And then he brought the telemetry out as well and was
if there is actually a song called "I Told You So,"
yeah,
this is what it was. This is precisely what we. I just love the irony. It didn't take long, right? It took 6 days.
It took 6 days.
6 days.
I have to say, I am genuinely surprised that it was Lando, because all week I said to you, I'm getting called a Lando fanboy here as normal, because whenever you back up a driver they don't like, it can't be that you have reason, you're just a fanboy. But I was like, Russell or Sainz will do this to Verstappen. I didn't expect it to be Lando. But it happened so quickly, and I haven't stopped laughing about it since yesterday.
Oh God! And it's we told you so. That's all I'll say. We told you so. It's as simple as the thing is what people don't understand. If a sport is broken, if the rules are broken, whenever they favor or hurt someone, they don't really look at who your favorite driver is.
Yep.
That's something the Lewis Hamilton fans realized in 2021. I continue to say this thing.
Yeah.
You have to understand this thing. A broken sport is not good for anyone. And maybe now they've learned the lesson. Actually, they haven't. You can just see the discourse. But they will never learn. It's the same cult Lewis Hamilton, the whole fan base that was there. It's just migrated to this one. Where it's the same victimization, same nonsense. You just don't want to watch and follow the sport with basically good faith. You don't do that, so cry.
All of the people, all of the Max fans who, throughout when Lewis Hamilton was being his fan base was being insane, who were commenting on my things, being like, "Thank you, a reasonable take," when I'm like, "This Lewis Hamilton stuff's ridiculous," are now the people commenting on my thing, the exact same people being like, "Oh, it's against Max," and I'm like, "You're just." Literally have just become Team LH. It's the funniest thing in the world. I guess we should talk about the incidences and Max and Lando. I
think makes sense. Let's start from there only. So, first of all, would you like to set the table for this one?
If you want. First of all, just because we're going to be talking about Lando Norris favourably. Hello, Sai. So... I know he hates this. It's fine. Maybe I'll put a chapter marker that says "Sai, click here," and it just skips, just for fun. But yeah, so essentially, obviously, Max started ahead of Norris and the run down to turn one. He actually got ahead of Sainz, who started on pole, which was kind of to be expected. Pole in Mexico it's one of the worst places to start on pole.
Yep.
Sainz managed to kind of fight him back, I think, by lap 7 after the safety car, right? If I'm not mistaken, 7 or 8.
Yep.
Max was ahead before the safety car. Once Sainz got ahead, then Lando started tracking down Verstappen. It actually didn't look like he was catching that much of points, but once he kind of got on the back, it was interesting to see he didn't wait around at all. He just went for it, which after last week, I kind of, in the back of my head, consistently said it will be Russell or Sainz that will kind of do the same as Verstappen did last week. I was very surprised that it was Norris. Norris, according to Christian Horner's telemetry, didn't actually go at the same rate as normal. He kind of swung it around the outside, dive bombed around the outside. I know. But yeah, he basically just made sure he had his foot in. He was controlled, went around the corner, and there's no way to prove, perfectly in this case, there's no way to prove whether or not he would have made the corner because he wasn't given a chance to, but he was ahead at the apex the whole way. He was apparently 15 kilometers an hour faster than normal. So what? Ahead at the apex.
Something happens. Something that happens due to DRS. So
he was ahead at the apex and in control, and last week showed us that's all that's important. Bottas incident with Russell showed us that's exactly what's important. So Max had to give him racing room. Max, understandably and predictably, didn't, which was normal. And then there was a second incident. I would say the first incident was just kind of slam dunk penalty. It was just racing. Norris took advantage of the rules. Max kind of fell straight for it, which I didn't expect, to be honest. I thought he would be ready for this. The second penalty then, Lando was ahead. Lando cleverly gave the position back to Sainz, but stuck ahead of Verstappen. I genuinely, I have to say, watching it the first time before watching it back, I thought when Max lunged it, I actually thought that was Norris kind of giving the position back for some reason. I realize I was mistaken now, but that's what it looked like on the TV feed at the time.
I think that was the case.
Maybe it was, because he did kind of move to the side and slow down.
He was trying to give back the place, but Max had a red mist moment that kind of cost him.
Yeah. I that's what it looked like to me. The second time watching, I'm not 100%, but either way, Max wasn't ahead at the apex, which Norris either cleverly positioned it to or wasn't giving it back, one way or the other, I'm not sure. And Max literally just ran it off track. I think that's the incident for both of us, where the first incident, 10-second penalty, that's exactly what was laid out last week, and everyone's arguing, why was it 10 instead of 5? Read the FIA documents. There was mitigating circumstances last week. We can explain that if you want. As for the second incident, personally, that was a proper, he caused a collision. He ran him off track.
Let's go through it one by one. Let's first go through the first incident. Now, again, there are a lot of people that have this question that why it was not a 5-second penalty, but it was a 10-second penalty. So, there are two things actually. The first is that at the start of the season, there has been a change from the FIA where they've increased the severity of the penalty from 5 seconds to 10 seconds. That has become more or less the norm. Rare cases where there are minor infringements, you see a 5-second penalty, which was the case with George in last weekend against Bottas. In case of the Max Norris incident, why it was a 5-second penalty, not a 10-second penalty, the reason behind it was Max also went off track, and also he was kind of responsible for pushing Lando off track. So that's a 5-second penalty for that. Lando was getting a 10-second penalty for overtaking off track. And the FIA stewards, they just basically cancelled the whole thing out and gave a 5-second penalty to Lando.
Yeah, they made an odd decision of instead of giving 5 and 5, which they perhaps could have done.
10 and 5.
They just or 10 and 5 they decided to just give 5 to 1 and kind of even it out.
Yeah. So that's kind of what why the whole thing actually panned out in this manner. The 10-second penalty for, again, there are a few. Okay, just to specify a couple of things. Again, Horner is saying that Lando was 15 kph quicker or something, right?
Yeah.
I think that was more or less because of DRS, plus the slipstreaming effect. And if you have two eyes and you can see, he made the corner. He was pretty much destined to do it, and the way the trajectory of the way Max went about it, you could see he was just pushing him off track. It was too obvious. That's why it kind of.
I think it was so obvious, and they were told after last week this was what was going to happen. As for the Bottas and Russell incident as well, remember that Russell was on the inside as the overtaker, so it was a different incident. And in that case as well, they did basically they gave some credit that, look, he made the corner overtaking on the inside. He didn't try and push him wide. And again, you need to remember as well that in last week's documents, they essentially said this should be 10 seconds, but there is some mitigating circumstances as to why it won't be this week. And when that happens in Formula One, look back over the years, that is basically, if this happens again, it will be just purely 10 seconds. And precisely. Max knew that coming into the weekend, so sorry, Red Bull fans.
Not only that, another doubt that a lot of people have, and they're questioning the consistency with the FIA, which is, we should always do that. But the incident between Checo and Liam Lawson. So in that case, what you saw was Checo dived down the inside and Liam went off track. I mean, he pushed Liam off track to a certain extent. But the reason why that was not given a penalty was, first of all, Checo was not entirely in control of the car. Yep. So when he pushed Liam off, at the very next turn, he gave Liam racing. There was enough room given for racing, and when Liam came on track, Liam pushed him off. Yeah. So it kind of cancelled out. That's why there was no penalty, and it was termed as a racing incident.
All of this is
given. Again, all of it is given in the FIA documents. They've actually explained everything, and honestly, they've done a brilliant job on that front.
The other thing is as well, someone brought up last week something similar to the Checo and Lawson incident, where It was actually very similar, sorry, to the Lando and Norris incident from last week, but the reason
Lando
it
and
relates
Norris
to
incident, which one? Sorry.
or Lando and
Max.
Verstappen incident from Austin. It was basically like for like the same. One, it was from 2023, so as I pointed out, the rules have changed since then. The guidelines have changed.
Yeah.
But the reason it relates to the Lawson Checo one, as I explained to him, was yes, this was Russell and Hamilton, with Russell forcing Hamilton off track, and Russell didn't get a penalty.
No, that's incorrect. I know which one you're talking about. That's
It was in
Suzuka.
Japan. Yep.
Yeah, it was in Suzuka. It was Lewis on the inside, Russell was on the outside. Lewis was ahead at the apex.
Yep.
The only reason Lewis was not given a penalty was because he was Russell's teammate. That's all.
That's what I was just pointing out here is normally if the teams don't get on the radio and kind of complain, unfortunately, sometimes the FIA director just goes, right, you guys deal with it. And because as much as Zach Brown hates it, because essentially Lawson and Perez are kind of in the same, not the same team, but kind of the same team.
Yeah.
Unsurprisingly, neither team got on the radio and kicked up a fuss. So it's kind of similar to Hamilton and Russell fighting, where if the team doesn't get on the radio to the race director is like, right, they cancelled each other out. That's it. They've sorted it out between themselves. If that was a situation of that was Norris and Verstappen, then both teams would be complaining and they wouldn't be able to go, just cancel each other out. They'd have to pass it to the stewards and you'd probably get 2 penalties. So for anyone wondering why that's the case, that's kind of basically what it is. Remember that before it goes to the stewards, the race director has to pass it to the stewards. It doesn't just automatically go to the stewards, which I think people don't seem to understand either sometimes. Yeah.
Precisely. Now the more contentious one. Your view on the second incident, what do you think actually happened?
Okay, I am still in two minds about whether Norris was giving the position back. I would need to go back and see and stuff. I'm genuinely not sure. Regardless, Norris was clever enough to know that he was basically at the entry point to the apex by the time Verstappen came up. In that position, Verstappen is the overtaking car, and under the guidelines, the overtaking car has to give room, like can't force the other car off track unless they are massively ahead at the apex. All of this rules that I basically said last week, you are just teeing up this exact position to happen. Here we are. In that position, though, unlike the first one, where Verstappen did force him off track, this was just Verstappen blatantly just being aggressive. He didn't even just force him off track. He actually banged wheels with him, came right over, forced him the entire way off track, went off track himself, hit Norris's car, and then continued on. Didn't give the position back either, by the way, stayed ahead. So at that point, even if Norris was giving him position, Max should have just given the position back there as well. So for me, that is overtaking off track, forcing another driver, causing a collision. That's a drive-through penalty. And I'm sorry, Max fans, but that is. If Norris did that exact same thing to Max, could you genuinely look us in the eye and with a straight face say, you think that Norris should have only got a 10-second penalty? Because I guarantee you my answer to that is bollocks. That was a drive-through penalty, and I think Verstappen got off very easy there. So if you want to complain about the first 10-second penalty being 5, then the second one should have absolutely been a drive-through. He could have ended up outside of the points because of that there. Easily.
Yeah.
Because he would have had to serve a drive-through and then a 10-second penalty on the pit stop. That would have put him at the back of the grid completely.
Yeah. So, maybe 7th or 8th. I don't think 7th or 8th probably, because the gaps are too big. Regardless, that's not the main contentious point. I think 10 seconds was fine. I'm not too, because the thing is, I've not seen a drive-through penalty for anyone. I mean, the kind of shit that Kevin Magnussen pulled at Miami early this season, I haven't seen him get any drive-through. So I tend to hold my breath when something like this comes up. So, because the thing is, there's no precedence of something like this. Maybe they should set in future, and I'm pretty sure they're going to need to do that because the next 4 races are going to be very
contentious.
Yeah. I think it was entirely a case of it was head loss from Max. There's no other way to put it, because he saw that Lando was ahead of him, and I think the calculation that he did was Lando is not going to give up the position. What he's going to try to do is trying to stretch the 5 second or 10 second gap, whichever the penalty is going to be.
Yeah.
And McLaren had the pace to do that. I think they both knew to an extent that that's going to be the situation.
Yeah.
Now, when that happens, he was a bit desperate. He didn't really notice correctly because, again, it's my view. I've seen it twice or thrice, the replay. In my view, Lando was giving him room to just let him through.
That's
That was
what I thought.
I
Yeah.
could understand, because that position, you don't really try to make those lunges. It doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah.
Throughout
Also,
the race,
just
we
where
didn't
he
really see
positioned
that.
the car was odd as well. Like it seemed like
Yeah.
he was going a bit further to the outside than you would normally kind of cut across the apex there, and he was
Yeah.
kind of right
And
on
you
the
don't
outside.
slow down the car at that very moment, right?
No,
So that's
no.
also a thing. And you add all this up, it's just, he could have easily, I mean, again, even at that point in time, maybe if Red Bull was smart enough, they could have just let him through, let Lando
Mhm.
through, and be fine with the 10 second penalty. But
Yeah.
again, why they did not do that is because they wanted to hold up Lando as much as they could. It was a catch-22 situation for them. So overall, I think it just appears that, look, when it comes to defensive driving, what I've realized is it's the perfection and the margin that these drivers have is very small. And I think we saw it with Alonso earlier in the season when it came to what happened in, I think it was the sprint in China, where he was able to hold off. I think he was P2, and he was able to hold off a lot of cars for a long time. And then all of a sudden, the car just, the tires were off the cliff, and I think he collided with Carlos Sainz and just went back.
Yeah.
And these kind of
Yeah.
things happen because, look, your brilliance can only take you so far when the car is just not performing. And I think this weekend, what happened with Max is he came in with the confidence that he can bully Lando, and he's slowly starting to realize that you can only get away with these things once or twice, but that's where the
I
problem
think
comes.
personally, I think Lando came into this weekend after last weekend realizing that, like, he needs to be fully aggressive with Max now. But he also, I thought it was very good driving for Lando because he played Max at his own game, but also ensured in both cases to kind of move and give enough space, because he knew like he can't afford to just be taken out, because it's
Yeah.
advantage Max if both of them DNF, for example, like Max is already far enough ahead that
Yeah,
Max can
I
afford a
think
DNF.
that's, yeah, exactly. He can
know.
precisely,
He's
and that's
he's far enough ahead of Leclerc that if
Leclerc
Norris
is,
and
yeah,
Max
70s.
DNF, yeah, like if Norris and Max DNF in one of these races, there's not
Yeah.
enough for Leclerc to catch him reasonably, and it takes Norris out of the fight. If Max DNFs and Norris continues, that's a huge issue for Max because it really swings it back. And I think Norris knew that. I have to say, I didn't expect Norris to kind of play it this well. Because if I'm honest, I didn't feel like after Austria and a couple of other incidents with the two of them, Norris was actually learning, like, I need to get on this. And this
Yeah.
felt like the first time where I was looking at it going, I think Norris has actually learned he needs to play this game now. And maybe it is just a case of pressure off where he's like, right, realistically, the title is a bit too far away unless something swings. So I'm just going to play him at his own game now. I have nothing to lose either. And I think that's probably the right mindset because it'll set him up for 2025. If he doesn't win this year, you'll get the right Norris next year. And I think it also, you can see that Verstappen definitely plays a different driving game with different drivers. And I think Norris has finally realized that like he needs to make sure that Max knows he's not going to just move out of the way. He's not going to back out. Like this is.
But I think it might be a bit too early to make that judgment, because this was a case of Lando catching. He caught out. He basically caught Max out a bit out of place, because what you can see in that particular incident is the first one. Max is kind of boxed in.
Yeah.
In front of him there's a Ferrari, and to his right is the McLaren, and he has to make a split second decision where if he does not brake at that very moment, he's going to clatter into the Ferrari, and that's not a good thing for him either.
Yeah.
So that's why he kind of weighed his options. Again, it's going to be very, very close, but I think Max has kind of played his cards in terms of, I think we'll get to that bit as well. First of all, I think what seems quite obvious right now is Max is going into the entire thing with a very sole focus. And I think it's a wrong way to approach it, but it is what it is. The sole focus of keeping Lando behind him at every race. I think that kind of sole focus can hurt you in the long run, because
it can backfire very quickly.
yeah,
All it takes is like a miscalculation there of him going off the track, for example, right? Or when he had that kind of lunge, a miscalculation there of clipping the inside of or clipping Norris's front wheel, right?
Yeah.
Norris survives that. Max goes into the wall. That no longer becomes like I kept Norris behind. That becomes oh shit, like I'm now 17, 18 points down. That happens one time over the next 4 races. It swings right back into Norris can win this now. So you're right. This is the wrong way to go about it. He is far enough ahead. The straight and right way to go about this, if he had played it, I think, rightly, right? We'll talk about the idea that once he got ahead, he was just playing the game of backing up Norris, and that was a calculated move. If they calculated that, I think they did it poorly. Realistically, he could have ended up 4th, and that would have been a 6-point difference instead of 10th. So they miscalculated if that was their plan.
No. In terms of after he got the 2 penalties, at that point he was just trying to hold on to whatever he had. I think there's also a bigger worry that Red Bull is not strong.
If that was the case, I think they did it poorly, because after that point, he tried to catch the Ferraris. And he spent about half of the stint trying to catch the Ferraris. You can see he gets within 2 seconds, then he's out with 2 seconds, then he's back up to nearly 2 seconds. So he's trying to catch them. Yeah. And if they made that calculation, in my view, they only made it about kind of halfway through the stint, at which point they lost Norris kind of 3 seconds, if you look at it that way. 3 seconds is not enough for that calculation. So if they did it poorly. And I think Lando was always going to catch Leclerc.
Seconds,
right? It was
Lando
6 seconds in total.
6 seconds. He was 6 seconds behind Leclerc.
It was 6 seconds in total. But my point is, throughout that stint, he kind of was catching and falling back, back. So in reality, if he was calculating that, they didn't calculate it until halfway through the stint, in which case, in reality, they only kind of caused 3 seconds of a loss to Norris. So if their game was to do that, it didn't really work, essentially. Maybe that was their plan, but it wasn't enough to make, like, 3 seconds wasn't enough of a difference for Sainz and Norris not to be on top of each other in reality over the course of the race.
But do you think Lando could have won the race? Precisely. Even I don't think so. I think Carlos had a lot of pace in hand, and he was just managing
so do I.
things.
He was managing. And that's why I think, like, if his plan was to hold up Lando to stop him winning the race, he didn't do enough. It didn't do enough to make the difference if Norris was going to catch Sainz. And in reality, he could have easily not done that and finished 4th, in which case he would have gained more points. So it was a poor calculation. It was a really poor. I don't believe it was a calculation. I think it was red mist. Red Bull decided to kind of just back him on it. And then later on, as the race unfolded, then it's like, oh shit, right, we've made the wrong decision here. Oh, try and back up Norris. And it's like, oh, it's too little too late now. Yeah. That's what it looked like to me.
The tires were done, right? The tire was, by the time I think Max pitted, he was basically sitting duck, maybe a lap or 2, and Lando was through. So,
and then it's easy to say it. It's easy to say afterwards, oh, I was just trying to back him up. It's like,
that's nonsense.
There's not really evidence.
A lot of people have said, and a lot of people are actually trying to buy into that idea. I just
if he did, he did it poorly.